Yeah, can you see my slide now? Yeah, okay, right. Okay, thank you, Francisco. I'm glad to be sharing this research insights. Last time, I think I shared about water management, water governance related topic that may have been already more than 1 year. um, so nice to see you all in the whole group. Of course, I did not actually circulate it widely outside of the university. But it's very good to have a small and focused, discussions and sharing. So my topic is, of course, there, trying to link two concepts together. So one is, of course, deliberation. That's where a lot of our work is focused, and our center is, on top of the world probably on that, idea. And the other one is the idea of co-production, and then trying to experiment these ideas in the specific context of city level urban water governance in some cities in Nepal and India. So it has been almost 6 years of work now with two consecutive projects, one funded by UK research system involving multiple research centers, and the second one was from Canadian IDRC, and the recent one. So as usual, I try to cover a little bit of my theory and then actually walk you through the context, showing images of, water management in the cities and those sort of things, just to give you a little bit of empirical context. I will run very quickly that part and then discuss in a little more detail on how my methodology actually was designed and implemented, and then share not sort of final conclusion. I'm trying to actually at this stage synthesize the findings into a paper, and sharing this at this stage and getting your feedback is going to be really helpful to me. So of course, deliberation has a lot to do, but I'm focusing here is a way of improving learning and legitimating power. And then this photo is covering my own slide, yeah. And then the idea of co-production is interaction between knowledge and social order, very much in the language of Sheila Jasanoff. And so the interaction between the two, and the pragmatic question that I'm posing in translating these ideas into a particular context is whether we can facilitate some incremental change in the system towards fairness, towards better access to water resources in this case, if not any transformative or radical change. So I'm not engaging conceptually on transformative change, but just putting it broadly as a spectrum of change that we may like to envision out of these ideas. So in terms of question, how can deliberation become transformative in co-production? Because a lot of ideas coming from co-production says that knowledge production, science, all institutions of knowledge, they are themselves part of the co-production, right? So even when we bring idea of improve deliberation into the practice, um, co-productionist may argue that, well, you are yourself part of this co-production process, right? So the thing is, how do we deepen that practice of deliberation and in those socially and politically constraining societies of the global south? So I'm making a broad distinction between the west and the global south. Of course, it's not that simple, but at least from my point of view, from deliberation and co-production point of view, there are certain peculiarities that define the global south. Uh, the nexus of power, constraining political institutions, hierarchical society, very poor, knowledge making institutions, weak science sort of work in general. So that I think those things I think differentiate global south. And Nepal and India, despite being vibrant democracies at the political level, when you get down to specific issues of water management or forest management, you come across, such a entrenched, non-deliberative space, non-deliberative system, colonial, hierarchical, caste-based, gender inequitable, all kind of things you see there, despite the image of, political democracy at the wider level. And then I actually link this how question. How do we do as a researcher? Um, and several of you a lot of my work has been on action research front, using the language of critical action research, trying to build critical epistemic communities in particular context, especially in Nepal, where I have worked most of my time. So how can this approach be brought, to improve deliberation and then to improve or break the the nexus of co-production that has been there. So this is my broad theoretical framing, and on the idea of engaged research, there are different languages used, and these languages are also emerging. Robert Chambers in international development arena in 1980s, he coined the term participatory action research, maybe not coined, popularized it, participatory research. But I actually take a little more political view, or culturally more nuanced view of critical action research, um, drawing on inspiration from these different sources. I myself trying to synthesize this approach as critical action research. I did publish one paper on that, but I'm also trying to adapt this idea in a slightly different language, locally engaged research as well, but it's still drawing on some of these aspirations. So this is the approach uh, to tackle the question that I mentioned previously around deliberation and co-production. Now, this is all about my theoretical framing. Now, a little bit of context I mentioned earlier, actually, the context of India and Nepal and urban water sector is very technocratic, is very top down, is very scientific, in biophysical sense. And there are also a lot of contestations around water issues, water rights. You may have seen the street demonstrations and violence in India, the images of those couple of years back when Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, they fought over river water, common river water. So that sort of thing is very common as well. So we have this paradoxical situation of very strong hierarchical administrative technocratic governance on the one end, and this sort of contestations on another. But then at the city level, the contestation is not that big. It's a small scale, and contestation is around different settlements, different communities. So this is the broader context. And past 6 years of my work has centered around 4 cities, two in Nepal, two in North India. These are all smaller cities, less than 300,000 of population in each city. But two are really small, less than 50,000. So two around 300,000 to less than 50,000. And the issue of water access in the urban area is really critical. We did this stock taking research at the beginning, but published later on. So there are institutional complexities, too many institutions actually, both in India and Nepal, slightly inherited from colonial past in India, but then indirectly influencing Nepali institution as well. And these different public institutions, they actually compete with each other. And then the other thing is cities are emerging as major downstream consumer of water, whereas water comes from upstream rural areas. So there is a lot of emerging conflict between upstream rural and downstream urban. Um, and of course, poor planning, land use planning, the sprawling of settlements in unplanned spaces, and also aging water infrastructure created 50 years back, especially in India. So it's a huge problem. And then with climate change, the supply of water is becoming more variable. So this is the problem situation. And now the project we did, one was the first one, and the earlier one started in 2014, was funded by UK Ecosystem Services and Poverty Alleviation Program. It was a nearly 50 million pound program for 10 years across the world. And that moment, I was partnering with Cambridge University team, the Department of Geography. And interestingly, this project, we had to articulate, some of the beneficiaries of the research. So this project requirement, to some extent, asked us to demonstrate improvement in deliberation, improvement and in co-production. So unlike traditional research, focusing on survey or modeling or whatever, so this provided some space to inject some of the ideas of critical action research, locally engaged research that I mentioned earlier. And actually we played a lot. And my colleague from Cambridge, he was Indian originally, so we had a really common view of, okay, let's use this project as an opportunity to influence things on the ground. So we had quite a bit of similarity on that. Second project from Canadian IDRC, International Development Research Center, started in 2016 and ended in 2019. And that time I was working from University of New South Wales, partnering with Nepal-based and India-based organizations. This also provided significant, space for maneuvering, knowledge and deliberation, to influence change on the ground at the city level. And both were city-focused urban water projects. And this project comprised this network of researchers uh, operating at different levels, basically. So we were outside. I was already outside of Nepal by the time these projects started. Sorry, there's some noise coming. A team from Cambridge and other UK partners, and of course India and Nepal based to research NGOs and think tanks. So I was just reflecting on how we work. This diagram is not the one at the design stage. I'm just reflecting from my side, how we operated. Um, and now just a quick tour through the cities before I come back to my conceptual reflection. So this is Haldwani is one city in Uttarakhand at the foot of the Himalayas, where the issue of upstream water source being tapped by downstream cities like this is the reality, is the situation. And there is a river by the side, a little dam tapping river, partly for irrigation and partly for urban water supply as well. Rapidly growing, and the water supply system is aging, the traditional infrastructure, and the current supply is not enough to meet the growing demand. So this is one city. Another city is in Nepal, Dolikhel, close to Kathmandu, on the top of a mountain. And, and geographically, this city doesn't have its own upstream areas because it is itself on the top of a mountain, right? So what it has done is to go 12 kilometers away to another mountain and then negotiate with the communities there and get the water from there. A small river called Rossi River. And there was a German, technical support, international aid, 30, 35 years back, and strong local leadership, having good relations with Kathmandu, national capital. So they were able to install that capability, but now with expanding town all around, this water supply system is stressed, and Asian Development Bank is trying to integrate a few municipalities together to make a huge, water supply system and structure. So that sort of change is happening. So this is second case, and third one is very much like the first case in India. Dharan in Nepal, now this case, third case, at the foot of the Himalayas, again getting water from upstream rural areas, and it is having a lot of tensions with upstream communities. There was an attempt from the government to evacuate, to actually displace upstream communities for conserving water for this city. And communities were given some compensation of the land, but then they again came back. They filed the case at the Supreme Court, and so there was court case conflict, and it was really difficult actually for us to engage into this kind of contested water environment to do our research. And frankly, we avoided, some of the very sensitive issues for our research, and we just picked up simple and actionable issues for our work. So how research flew, typically starting with inception workshops of the communities and city level governments, presenting our framework, getting their input, and interestingly providing substantive space for them to identify priority areas where they want our research to be done, to be focused. So we gave some space, of course, within a broader framework of what we wanted to do. And then within 6 to 9 months, we developed the idea of what we now call Urban Water Forum, which became the major platform for deliberation. Um, so I will highlight that a little bit. And then after that, that urban water forum and a specific research and traditional research element like survey and focus group discussions, they went together. So at the center of the process after that was urban water forum, organized every 6 months. So what was urban water forum and what is it? Is still continuing beyond the project, so that's a good thing. So we had at least four things together in the urban water forum. uh, we had, of course, science, represented by us, our group, the project team, local research team. Of course, not a biophysical only, but a sort of interdisciplinary, policy-oriented science group. So that is one group, and the other one is authority. So without public authority, people exercising and people having that legitimacy of public authority, the forum wouldn't be complete. At least this is how we felt, right? So we had city officials and water regulators, those sort of public people, and then of course citizens in broad sense, but disaggregated into squatter communities, informal settlement leaders, those sort of different groupings within that. And then on stakeholders, mostly private sector, utility provider, those sort of people, and even NGOs working in the sector. So we tried to bring these four different people with four broad different stakes into the urban forum, and it took a long process over time of engagement, interaction. Initially, people were suspicious actually of, well, your group may escalate the problem we are having. That's how different stakeholders told us, including the municipality, because each city has its own history of conflict and tension around water, and none of them wanted anyone to come and escalate that conflict. So we had to do a little bit of trust building, and then ensure how we handle those conflicts. And in one city, we actually avoided the most conflicting issues. So lots of interactions, discussions across these four components in different formats. Um, yeah, just visuals. Yeah, and then we also included in our methodology a strong, not strong, significant element of biophysical analysis as well. Testing water, measuring water, collecting climate change data, undertaking some sort of historical analysis. So this information was actually injected into urban water forum. So different forum had a different focus. Sometimes climate change, sometimes water quality, sometimes conflict. Those sort of issues. Um, so trying to deepen deliberation based on information, and in that sense we were pretty um, supportive of using science, biophysical science to inform deliberation, and that actually helped. And 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 one thing we did in addition to urban water forum was to organize expert roundtables, local water expert roundtables. We found both in India and Nepal that there are a whole range of water experts, who have been engaged in the area locally. They know how many taps, how many springs are located in different, context, and how different projects did the work in different time, and what was the lesson, what were the failures, So these water engineers, water utility managers, all these kind of people, um, they are really good local experts, and they have knowledge, including geologists. In one case, we invited hydrogeologist, or something like that, from Department of Geology in Nepal, and he actually made expert judgment on how that particular catchment is going to respond to uh, the stone quarrying on, and all kind of developmental activities being done over there. So local expert knowledge, not just the fresh research that we were doing, but actually the existing local expert knowledge and historical memories was also very, very helpful. And one thing on context I missed earlier is each cities, they have this informal settlement, too often deprived of water access from the formal system, and they actually rely on these streams and other spring sources nearby, but they are drying out, they are polluted, being polluted increasingly. And of course, the population in all cities is also going. Okay, so I mentioned context and methodology. Now, what we achieved in terms of local consequence, uh, I would say there were a few notable things which we highlighted very much while reporting to the donors. But I think they were still trivial and small scale change. For instance, one municipality, it developed a policy of water recharge system as part of tackling water scarcity. So when building new houses, they developed a recharge sort of policy, and they adopted it. So to what extent it is good and to what extent it is transformative, that's an open question. But it's still, what I can say is that that was a small co-production success generated by improved deliberation using our methodology, as I mentioned, uh, through which city officials, they crafted a new policy instrument and they implemented it. So it shows that improved deliberation through locally engaged research can lead to this kind of improvement within a limited time frame as well. Okay, so this is the empirical story. Now coming back to, let me just take 5-6 minutes more, if that is okay, if I am on time. Any feedback on time? Is it okay?
It's okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah, right. Now, so what can we learn conceptually about deliberation and co-production from these 6 years of experiment in 4 cities in 2 countries? So question 1 is, did locally engaged research expand depend deliberation? Yes, it has done pretty well, I would say, especially when we had broadly favorable political environment. So both India and Nepal, researchers can take critical positions, or any civil society actors can do, can exercise their political rights and all those. So it's a pretty open political environment in broad sense. But as I mentioned earlier, the water governance is highly hierarchical and technocratic. Yes, my answer to this question is yes, and partly because, which I missed to mention earlier, the local research team working in partnership with the international research team, they were able to circulate ideas for improvement, ideas for water justice, ideas for climate integration, climate risk integration, ideas for the access, equitable access of the informal settlements through academic debate, national policy debate, international discussions, policy oriented and academic. So I think there is an element of discursive representation as well, not just local and face-to-face process of deliberation. Um, and as I mentioned earlier, some small scale policy change we have seen. So yes. Now the second question is, did improved deliberation lead to improved practices of co-production? Um, I think not quite, because I felt like a lot of time our project team had to actually comply with and engage with the officials to make project happen, to make project activities, happen, on the ground. So in some way, a lot of our activities may have reinforced the status quo, the elitism, the technocratic influence. Um, but yeah, but it's still, in some respect, as I mentioned earlier in first point, it it challenged that the deliberation really got deepened. People became reflective. And then one interesting thing in Nepal's case was that within this 6 years period, we moved from a bureaucrat run local government to elected local government. That's what the political transition was happening. And suddenly, when the new political leaders were elected and they started their job, the demand for knowledge, the demand for dialogue, the demand for evidence, it grew tremendously. So that actually opened up, space for deliberation quite a lot. Um, and a lot of changes happened only after that. Um, the third question is, because our research focused on primarily on local governance domain. So what is the space for improving deliberative governance when we act primarily locally? I think there is a significant space. It's not, we don't always have to work at the national level. There is significant space at the local government level as well. Of course, Nepal's local government is very powerful after this 2015 constitution. Indian local government is also powerful in global standard. There is significant space to deepen deliberation and to influence local level policy planning and practices. Um, so what are the new territories conceptually and practically in relation to this deliberation and co-production interface? There could be many, but one thing that I am advancing and I'm working on is the interface between forum and what I call policy practice lab. Lab sounds a little technocratic, but I'm trying to use it in the sense that having a smaller group representing different knowledge domain and also having politically diverse views, bringing them in a small and informal group setting and facilitating open deliberation without fears of any political implications that would have come in the case of more public forum, right? So, so one of my frontiers is that, not just organizing the water forum, which is actually a forum of 50, 45 to 60 people coming from all different, subsections and subsectors, and that becomes too public and too political, and people they don't engage in dialogue. They really advocate their positions. So the deliberative space is lost when you bring people in such forums that are seen as political, right? But deliberative gains achieved if we have these smaller policy labs. But then we also need forums. So this sort of recursive interaction between lab and forum is what I'm actually testing and exploring further. And finally, the role of locally engaged, interactive, critical, whatever we say, or what is the role of this research? Definitely, this has value, and this is, of course, sort of normative and political positioning that every researcher, defines for ourselves or himself, depending on trajectory and the kind of engagement one has done. And since I spent more than 15 years already in doing this kind of research, so I'm just trying to expand this more, engaged and interactive research. But it's getting very different, working from within Nepal and working now from Australia past 6-7 years. So I'm updating that approach, seeing that there is a value of this approach to improve deliberation and hopefully the process of co-production as well. Thank you very much. Yeah, I would like to just end here, Francisco.
Thank you.
Should I stop sharing the screen?
Yeah, please stop sharing the screen. Yeah.